Welcome, everyone, to Exploring Quality in Family Childcare, Selecting High Quality Materials for Open-Ended Play. My name is Grace Eilers. I am the Family Childcare Content Specialist with Satellite, and I'm excited to be here talking about selecting high quality materials. And we are going to begin by placing this concept in a few standards of high quality early care and education. So in Satellite's accreditation standards, there are many that actually intersect with this topic. So we're going to focus on one in section 2, physical environment, equipment, and materials. And it says that materials and equipment are developmentally suited and appealing to all children in the group, and there is a sufficient amount and variety of toys and materials for the number and developmental range of children in the group. So we're going to talk today about how to support that wide developmental range with a mixed age group of children. So the Young Star criteria, this is Wisconsin's quality rating and improvement system, also mentions learning materials under their indicator developmentally appropriate environments. In that, they say that materials should be accessible and they should be reflective of the Wisconsin Model Early Learning Standards 5 domains, different learning styles, and varied levels of difficulty. And connecting it to the Wisconsin Model Early Learning Standards, there is a sample strategy for adults that shows up among where this is spoken about all throughout the Wisconsin Model Early Learning Standards. But it says that adults are encouraged to select toys and materials that could be used in a variety of ways, sometimes referred to as open-ended toys, in which children's imagination will be engaged. So we're going to bring all these pieces together today by talking about those high quality materials that are going to support children's deep, open-ended play. And before we dig into it and just jump right in, here's a question for you to consider. What comes to mind when you think of high quality materials? What comes to mind? This is just to center us all in how we are present today and how we're showing up. What are our beliefs around what do high quality materials look like? What comes to mind? Please put your thoughts, if you are able, in the chat. Safety, safe. Safety. Social says curriculum. I see Tracy says age appropriate. Jaquita says enough, having enough materials. Well, thank you all. We are going to momentarily talk about some of those components, and a lot of what you've already talked about is going to be, those pieces are going to show up later on. But before we do that, we're going to start by dispelling this myth. And I was very pleased to see that no one said the word expensive. And it's okay if you have that preconceived notion, because this is a myth that something that is high quality must be expensive. And we're going to start off today by saying that these two are not equated. So you could have high quality materials that are inexpensive, and you can have high quality materials that are expensive. Just because a material or a toy is expensive does not make it high quality. And in actuality, you could have an entire program. Your whole program could be made with homemade or repurposed high quality materials. So you don't need everything to match. You don't need it to be color coordinated. You don't need everything to be made of wood. We are going to go over some of those components for you to think about when considering what does quality look like in my program. So similar to this image, you can incorporate a mix of different types of materials throughout your space. So you hear this word a lot, and the word appropriate came up in response to that first question. Developmentally appropriate practice, environments, materials. And I have 3 questions here that act as that starting place for determining whether or not a material is developmentally appropriate for a child. So our first question here, which I know many of you are very well aware of, is it safe for children to use? So this has to do with those sound health and safety practices. Are the pieces a choking hazard, particularly for children under 3? Is it made with safe materials for children to handle? Does it have sharp edges? Or could it be taken apart in a way that could make it unsafe? These are all those questions that speak to whether or not a material is safe for children to use, which I know all of you who are attending today are very well aware of. And you look in this image here, for example, at Happy Hearts Childcare, Linda has placed infant safe materials out in this group of infants. So our second question is it relevant to children? So this question really speaks to the importance of considering, the child's individuality and then their cultural context, the world that they're living in. So when selecting materials for your space, you must consider, is this something that these children are going to be interested in? Is this something that promotes an area of development that a child is working toward? Is this something that reflects that unique cultural context of this child in a broader community? So, for example, turning to this image again, I see a few materials here that have those movable parts. They can be held in a variety of ways. They may make noise when the infant picks it up and manipulates it. Let's say that this is a particular interest for the infant on the right here. They're working on grabbing things and moving it around while they're on their tummy. So it would be something that is relevant to that child. Third question, is it challenging but not overwhelming? Is this material something that is cognitively, emotionally, physically, socially stimulating for a young child where they can continue developing those skills and practicing those developing skills? So, for example, you most likely would not give a 3-year-old those infant linking clips that the infant on the right in this image here is holding and exploring. But you would probably give a 3-year-old these clips. Similar function, higher difficulty level. So it's going to be challenging, but not too overwhelming. There are different shapes here, angles. The child could explore by making something that is 3D in shape. It's just the right amount of challenging without being overwhelming or too boring. So, and I know all of you are constantly thinking about this in your program because the children will show you if they're being appropriately challenged. So now we're going to dig into what question 2 may look like in real life. Do your materials reflect that unique cultural context of this child in a broader community? So this is just one component of what makes your materials high quality. So thinking about materials, especially those that display or represent people that have a variety of physical traits, abilities and skills, language, age, race, gender, family structure, cultural traditions, et cetera, et cetera. A couple of examples here. Marilee helped this child on the left create a Lucia Day hat, which is a Swedish holiday. And Sarah on the right actually pasted children's images on square blocks and put them near a mirror. So these two things are showcasing how the materials are reflective of the children in the program and the broader community. A couple other examples. Natalie has baby dolls with a variety of skin tones. And Sarah has placed family photos in a space where children can touch them, they can hold them and manipulate them. And I struggled with the one on the right because I thought, is this an environmental display or is this a material? Because those two things are different. And I landed on that we can call it a material because children, it is at their eye level where they can pick it up and move it around. So the reflective of the broader community piece is even more important for children who live in more homogeneous programs. So for example, maybe where every child or every family member in the program is white. And in these types of scenarios, children, they must still have conversations about differences in physical characteristics, in behavior, in language, identities among people because they're going to begin to recognize that diversity is a normal, natural part of life, which it is. One factor in the scientific community that is considered when determining the health of a species is genetic diversity. So the more diverse a population, the stronger and more resilient that population. So these conversations about diversity begin in early childhood, and it can be done through your materials. So for example, incorporating multicultural foods and children's literature with a variety of characters, you must also commit to welcoming conversations about these materials when children begin asking questions because they are curious beings. So for example, I had a similar multicultural set in my dramatic play area. A child looked at the steamed pork bun, the baozi, and said, "Ew, this is weird." And that welcomes a conversation about what food is and maybe what it could taste like, and modeling openness, especially if you have not tried that particular food, for that openness to the child. So we're now going to get into the differences between open-ended and closed-ended materials. Open-ended materials can be used in many ways. So for example, these children on the left, they're using small cubes, bowls, magnetic tiles, and paper, it looks like, to construct this elaborate scene and then engage in some cooperative pretend play with one another. And because these pieces are open-ended, children can use their imagination to decide what is going to act like what. So on the right side from Anthony's bilingual preschool, you can see an example of how open-ended materials support a wider age range. Another example of open-ended materials, some cooperative construction play with wood slices and some colorful loose parts, it looks like, at Kathy's Kids Home Childcare. At Explorers of Truth Childcare, children, they're exploring water beads, scoops, molds. There are many, many possible ways that children can explore and use these materials. And you're going to find that the open-ended materials, they support all types of play, but particularly construction play, sensory play, art, and dramatic play. On the flip side, materials can be closed-ended or have a specific purpose. So examples you can see here on the slide include puzzles, books, shape sorters, memory games, child-sized cleaning materials. And children outgrow these types of toys more quickly. So there's need for more rotation. With each of these, there's typically a beginning and an end. So closed-ended materials are helpful for focusing on a specific skill. Again, because of this, there's going to be that smaller age range for what is considered developmentally appropriate, what is considered challenging, but not overwhelming and not too boring. Closed-ended materials could also have a predetermined storyline. So the examples on the slide are those with your commercialized characters. When children play with these types of materials, they are more limited in what these characters will do because it is attached to a storyline. So children are going to get bored more quickly with these types of materials, and it does not lead to that deep, engaging play we saw earlier. I'm going to now pass it off to Laura to talk about a few units that are available through Satellite's Loan Program that incorporate open-ended materials.
Thanks, Grace. So one of the things that I get to do as the Associate Director of Satellite is I get to put together bins of materials around a theme. And then we lend these out to Satellite participants. And so this slide highlights two of the 40-something themes that we have. And I just wanted to describe a little bit about how I think about picking out the materials. It's actually one of my most joyous things that I do because I feel very strongly about providing children with the ability to have the materials in their environment be a strong part of the curriculum that you offer. And so, for example, when I'm looking at materials for the infant unit, one of the things that I'm looking for is a variety of um, of things that the materials are built out of. So children will get a chance to feel items that are made out of silk. In this case, there's a basket of silk cloths, and they'll be able to feel the hardness of the wood in the basket that has those wooden discs in it. They'll be able to see the different colors in the different materials. They'll be able to, for the infant unit, they're going to be able to taste and with their tongue or feel different textures. For example, that purple ball that has to get washed often because it's going to get licked because it's in an infant unit. But that provides a different type of material for children to explore. In the Build a Village unit, some of the things I was thinking about were the weight of materials. And so some of those, everything in the Build a Village unit is all wood. So that's what kind of brings those pieces together. And, well, actually, it's not all wood because those bricks that are behind that one car, those are made out of a material that is actually really heavy. And it simulates the feeling of a real brick. And so that was something that you can think about as far as your different materials, different weights as well. And so this is both just an opportunity for you to see some of the different units that we have and to think about the types of thoughts that might go into creating thematic units in your program.
Thank you, Laura. Now we're going to dig into why open-ended materials, which support open-ended play, are so important in your family childcare program. So in this video, we are going to see an example of what play with open-ended materials may look like with preschoolers. So this video is in a group program. So I would encourage you, they talk about how much differentiating an educator does. Think about how much more you do with mixed age group as a family childcare educator.
Okay, ready? Put your hands in the air so I don't mush anyone's fingers. These are more ideas of things you could use for your design.
This is a bowl, and this is these are big ones.
In early childhood, teachers are constantly differentiating for children depending on where they are.
One is much smaller.
One is much bigger and one is much smaller.
Open-ended materials allow young children to access learning in a way that's meaningful to them in that moment in time.
I'm giving you some small rocks. See what kind of marks those make.
If you think about the zones of proximal development, we don't want to frustrate children with a material that's too hard for them, but we don't want to bore children with something that's too easy for them. Open-ended materials lend themselves to children using them in a way that they can learn at their own rate, and we're meeting them where they're at.
Your job today is going to be to move, to transfer. Can you say that word? Transfer. To move the sand from the container to the bottle. And in front of you, we have all these different materials.
Open-ended materials don't have one right way of being used. Children can explore them and use their imagination and take them where they want.
Look at that. She put something inside her funnel. Does that change how the sand goes through?
Yeah, it goes through here.
It goes through there.
I want to try that.
You want to try that?
And teachers are there as facilitators by their side to help them explore those ideas and ask the right question at the right time to advance their understanding and learning.
Can you put your fingers across that and see what it feels like?
That's a good idea.
It has a little bit of texture.
Materials that we choose are often coming from a natural environment. Oftentimes it's not things that we're purchasing, but found items. Things that will give teachers and children an opportunity to have conversations.
Very important thing.
Yeah.
What's inside there?
And many times those materials that are put out are there to support vocabulary.
It sounds like tunnel.
It sounds like tunnel, and funnel. What do you notice about those words? Tunnel, funnel.
Tunnel.
They
Well, I want
right, Mark?
When you have interesting things in your classroom,
The honeycomb.
Oh, those are honeycombs too?
you have interesting things to talk about. You might notice one child starting to do one thing and another one will look over and say, oh, that's a great idea. Often you'll see them having conversations and genuine relationships are starting to be formed.
Can I have one?
I love the quote, when you have interesting things in your program, you have interesting things to talk about. So the video showed examples of loose parts, which are those open-ended materials that can be used for all sorts of things, including experimentation like the video showed. So if you're participating in Satellite and you're interested in trying these out, we do have loose parts for toddlers, which they're not chokeable and they can be explored by littles. So we have those in natural and color. So you can see examples of those on the slide. We also have loose parts, a loose parts collection, 2 loose parts collections for preschoolers and school agers. Again, you can see those incorporate smaller items that maybe older children enjoy working with. We have that in natural and in color. So the reason we start off with loose parts is because a lot of the research on high quality materials focus on open-ended materials like loose parts and how it affects play and learning. So studies like Travis Smith and colleagues and Dausch and colleagues show that exposure to open-ended materials like loose parts lead to more autonomous play, which helps children better able to enter and sustain play. So in turn, being able to engage in that deep sort of play helps children practice their concentration. It helps them practice their creativity and their problem solving skills. So the type of materials that you have in your program impact the quality of children's play and therefore their growth and learning. And another benefit of having more open-ended materials is for you as an educator. So if children are able to become actively engaged in your environment, they're going to have fewer behavioral challenges. So in a sense, open-ended materials are going to support you as an educator because it opens your capacity to have those meaningful conversations with children about their play. Now, I do recognize that if you are a program or if you have children in your program who are used to more closed-ended materials, they may need more support initially generating ideas on how to play with more open-ended materials like loose parts. And this is where that modeling is really going to impact them and get their creativity going. And a quick example of how open-ended materials support imaginative play, we're going to watch this video.
Building blocks. To us, they're just another toy. But for a child who's always learning, they're much more than that. They're a classroom, the perfect objects for teaching early math and art skills. They can be built into castles, or counted and sorted. They can become cars or airplanes or people or just about anything. Because sometimes the less a toy does, the more your child is able to use and develop their imagination. That's a truck, I think, huh? Got a truck behind the taxi cab? Here, let me see. You want to do one too? Here, follow me. My child is always learning, so I'm always looking for ways to teach them.
Great Start to Quality is Michigan's rating.
So I'm going to talk about another study now, a meta-analysis, also known as a systematic review. Essentially, it is a study where they look at a lot of different studies about a particular topic, and they are trying to identify trends. So this one was on the power of open-ended materials on children's development. So Kankaya, Martin, and Haugen in 2025, they started with hundreds of studies on this topic. And they deduced that for infants, toddlers, and preschoolers, open-ended materials are connected to quantitative development. So these are things like those foundational math skills, like understanding size, number, comparisons, patterning, sorting. It also showed to support perceptual performance. which I was like, what does that even mean? And this just includes the visual skills that children have. So being able to differentiate using their eyes, their auditory processing skills, and their motor coordination. It also was shown to support children's memory, so their ability to recall information, their self-regulation, which is, as all of you know, being able to manage those internal processes that are linked with stimulation, like emotions going on throughout the body. And it also found a trend that supports that open-ended materials help children develop convergent and divergent thinking skills. Very, very closely tied to problem solving, and we're going to go more in depth into what that looks like right now. So let's break down what is happening in the brain as a child uses divergent and convergent thinking. So divergent thinking happens when you have a choice or a problem, some sort of starting point. So that we're starting from all the way on the left-hand side. And divergent thinking happens when you diverge from the problem and you think about all the possible solutions or choices that you may have or options. And you can see we're diverging from that problem. We're coming up with all of those solutions and we're ending up with lots. We're brainstorming lots of different ideas. And as you can imagine, this is where creativity is activated. And now that we have all those ideas, we can only choose one. So we have to narrow it down. We have to converge on a solution. And that's where convergent thinking is activated. Narrow down our options to select a choice, to make a choice to find a solution. And we're going to see what this looks like from a child's perspective, thinking about it through the lens of, I'm going to build something with blocks. This preschooler has a lot of colored blocks and they want to start out with a plan. Not all children want to start out with a plan, but this child wants to start out with a plan and they want to decide what they're going to build. So they're going to activate that divergent thinking and they're going to think, oh, well, maybe I should do a store. I love going to the store. Or, oh, maybe a pirate ship, like in the movie I saw last week. Or a garage for all the cars that I love. Or maybe I'm going to make a tall castle, like the one in my favorite book. So as you can see, this child activated divergent thinking and they came up with lots of different solutions, lots of different possibilities to choose from. So now that they have all of those options, they have to activate convergent thinking and converge on a decision. So they're going to have to narrow down their options. They may think, oh, I'm not really feeling the pirate ship today. No, I did a garage yesterday. Maybe a store or a castle. No, I'm going to build a tall castle. And that's what they do. And that was convergent thinking and decision making at work. So I noticed a pattern emerging as I dug into, the difference between open-ended and closed-ended materials. And it was that I found it very challenging based on the definitions that we know about open-ended and closed-endedness to perfectly fit every material into either a closed-ended or open-ended bucket. So like many things in life, we have what I call an endedness spectrum. So all the way on the left-hand side, you can see this is the closed-ended side. This is where we're going to put those commercialized materials that they already have that predetermined storyline that children are going to be impacted by when they're engaging in play with these types of materials. Also over here are the ring stackers, puzzles, those shape sorters, books as well. Although there are wordless books that again incorporates more of that open-ended element to it. So it's not always black and white. Next, we have play food, which can be used in a variety of ways. However, a banana has been predetermined to be a banana, although some children, may use it as a phone. Cars like these they already have a shape, they have a model, they maybe even have a function, like if you have a fire truck car, that is a fire truck, and it may be used in many different ways, but it still has a predetermined function associated with it. That's why we put cars and play food towards the middle. Similarly, we have animal figure puppets and animal figurines, which again can be used in lots of different ways. And a giraffe will most likely stay a giraffe. So the true open-ended materials, those are the ones that don't have a beginning or an end. They don't have a predetermined function or a storyline. So things like these pegs here that could act as wooden people, figurines, or anything that the child imagines. Blocks are the perfect example of open-ended materials that we've been using quite a few times already. Play-Doh. These things can be structured and sculpted in any way. Crayons. Any type of art material that can produce anything that a child imagines. And then we have the natural materials like sand, water, pine cones, acorns. They can be shaped and molded and used in many ways. So again, the open materials on the open-ended side of the spectrum, they have a much wider age range, which is going to be helpful for you as a family child care educator. And now we're going to have fun. We're going to have our own little fun together. Go forth, if you're able, and collect 5 materials from your environment. And if you don't want to go into the room or you can't access the space, maybe just jot down 5 materials that you know that you have. I know you've all picked up materials enough that you probably have a mental map of your program. Take 1 minute to go collect materials, and we're going to come back and we're going to see where they fall. Does everyone have 5 materials in their hands, or a mental list or a physical list if you put it in the chat of 5 materials? Now I would encourage you to just take a moment, knowing what we just learned, where would they fall on the endedness spectrum? I am seeing a lot of blocks, a lot of art materials in the chat. Those would fall more toward the open-ended side of the spectrum. Whereas I also see a lot of books and puzzles. Those would fall more towards the closed-ended side. What about puppets? Mary asks, what about puppets? It's a great question. And again, puppets can be used for so many different things. There's so many possibilities, similar to a baby doll, on how a child may use puppets. So we definitely would put that more towards open-ended. Now, is it as open-ended as sand and water? Probably not. Mary says kids love puppets. They do. They do. And children all enjoy all sorts of materials that may, they may enjoy things that are more closed-ended sometimes and more open-ended other times. Lots of reflecting going on in the chat. How about flannel boards? Depends. There are lots of different ways that a child could use a flannel board. There may be a story attached to the flannel board pieces that go on the board, so that would be more closed-ended. And I'm glad we're having this conversation because I think it showcases how not everything is black and white. So we're going to end our time talking about how to choose high-quality materials that support that open-ended play. And we're going to begin, we're going to have more fun together. We're going to do an analogy together to highlight a very important concept. So I'm going to ask you 3 different times to choose a restaurant. And each time, I want you to notice what's going on in your brain. Okay? Pick a restaurant. So now that you've chosen one, how did it go? How long, maybe think about how long did it take for you to decide? Did you maybe feel overwhelmed by the options? Yeah, Chiquita says lots of options. And we see here that there are lots of options all jumbled together. Others say, oh, it just took me 1 second. Maybe some of you, it sounds like some of you had one of these options for lunch, so that was very easy to decide. Or maybe you see your favorite on here. Essentially, there is no rhyme or reason for how these options are displayed in front of you. All right, we're going to do it again. Pick a restaurant from the options on the slide. And when doing so, notice what's going on inside your brain. how did this one feel? Yeah, it felt very limited. Some of you said that it made the decision easier. So in the previous prompt, you had lots of options that were all jumbled together, no rhyme or reason. And in this one, we may have had too few. All right, we're going to do it one more time. Pick a restaurant from the following. And when doing so, notice what's going on inside your brain. So how did this feel? It's organized, got choices to think, helped me categorize them. Yeah, multiple choices. Now, in this scenario, we have the same number of options as we did in the first one, but they are neatly categorized by cuisine type, as you can see. So it may have felt easier for you to make a decision because of how they were arranged. For some of you, maybe not. Barbara says it was a little confusing. I rarely have a preference. Many of you said that it felt more organized, easier to make a decision. And we do this to think about what it may feel like for a child in an early learning environment. As you can see now, it has been changed to learning materials. And this is why, if we have too many options that are not organized appropriately and in a way that makes sense, it can feel overwhelming. You might not see what you want. It might take you longer to decide. If you have too few options, you might not see what you were hoping for. Like one of our participants who was hoping for Panera and it disappeared. So this is just to showcase why environmental arrangement and number of choices matter for young children. We're going to get more into this later on this year, and we'll have a whole hour to talk about play area arrangement. So let's talk about amount or number for a second. Mixed age environments, there must be enough options for children to play harmoniously together, but not too many that it becomes overwhelming. So we don't want to tell you how many materials to have in your program. Satellite wants you to use this information that we're giving to you to decide what's going to be most appropriate for your program. So this depends on your space. You may only have room for one block shelf, one table for art, and a play kitchen. The appropriate number of materials is different for every program, and it's going to depend on your culture, educational philosophy, the physical space, the age span of children in the program, and the number of children. So you're going to have to experiment on, what feels right for you in your program and the children in your program. Because again, children are going to show you with their behavior whether the materials are suitable for them and are going to lead to that engaging play. So for all of the reasons that we have mentioned thus far, it is important to have more open-ended than closed-ended materials in your space. And it's also practical as open-ended materials, they're going to have that wider age range and they can be used in multi-age groups like family childcare programs, and it's going to support that mixed age play. Within the balance of more open-ended than closed-ended and just the right number of materials, variety is also important. Again, there are so many different ways to incorporate variety in your space. So think for a moment whether or not you see the following areas represented in your space on a regular basis. I know many of you may not have all of these options out all the time, but do children have regular opportunities to engage with materials that fall into each of these categories? And again, we'll dive into this deeper later this year in an upcoming Exploring Quality session. I'm going to pass it back to Laura because this is a particular interest of hers to talk about using something real over a replica in your program.
Thanks, Grace. So Grace and I, while she was developing this training, got into a conversation about whether we need to be making sure children always have child size items available to them, or whether it's okay to give them full-size real items to use. And so I just wanted to present this to people to think about. One of the things that I think about, again, when I'm creating our curriculum items or when I'm the educator working with children, is I think about how much children love to be a part of what adults are doing. And a lot of times that means having access to the same materials that adults are using. So for instance, in our baking unit, we have some child size items like the play food, but then intentionally we put in adult size pots and pans, baking equipment, spoons, so that children can be playing in a way that reminds them of being in their home. And for me, a family child care program, that's one of the strengths that we have, is that we are in a home. And so we can be blending the materials of our home into the experience of what children have. And so that's just something I want to put into the space for you to think about. The other example is our construction unit that has real tools that's in it. And those are real vests and real cones. Whereas the signs aren't real adult size signs. Those are preschool size signs. So it's a blending of the concept of providing children with child size items and also giving them a chance to blend into the experience of the home.
Thank you, Laura. So we're going to end by providing a few examples of reusing and repurposing materials. So this ties very well with what Laura was just speaking about. You can repurpose or reuse materials that you have in your home within your program. So this can be particularly useful when thinking about dramatic play, when thinking about your blocks area or art. So in the image on the left here, you can see Little Learners Childcare. They put out a few secondhand metallic art pieces, pine cones from outside. I see a variety of cleaning utensils as well that are look to be mainly adult sized. On the right, this preschooler has created this elaborate structure with paper towel rolls. I see old CDs in there, tin cans, wood scraps, it looks like, among many other things. And on the right here, this image, these are loose parts. So your loose parts, they don't need to come in a kit that you purchase. They can be sourced from your everyday environment. Mary Jo on the left here has even reused something real, like a Kleenex box, as this holder for colored scarves. So again, this is something that adults use. She has repurposed it in her environment. Something so simple, but can have quite a big impact on children and on our environment as well. On the right here, you can see this educator took mason jar lids and other types of cylinders or bracelets of some sort, and then place them in a basket near a coffee mug tree and a couple paper towel holders. And this would help engage children in very unique construction play where they can learn all about gravity and sizes and movement. And that is just, this educator is repurposing things that they have found and collected from their space. So I hope that this event helped inspire you to think more deeply and more critically about the materials in your space. And I'm hoping that it gave you a few ideas to incorporate in the future. Thank you so much for your participation.